Hi, Richard the Writing Guy here. I want to talk with you about how to get to know your audience before you write any business document. And first of all, I have to tell you, this is the most important thing in all business writing. Virtually every decision that you ever make in writing and formatting any business document should be based on what do you know about your readers. And so I want to show you how to size up the audience for any given business document. What you're going to discover is that for all business documents, you're going to have more than one person as your audience. You may address the document to one person, but as you know from your own experience, people forward documents to other people. And in fact, you might address the document to several people in the CC of your email. So you have a multiple audience, and the way to figure out who they all are is to map them. I call this a map. That's a metaphor. You can think of it as a map of business space. And the idea is you make this little diagram. This is you. You think of yourself as being in the middle. You make the rings, and you drop into each ring the name or job description or title of each person or group who is going to be reading your document that you're about to write. And if you'll do this, a very useful thing will be the result. You're going to naturally think of the most important member of your audience first, and so without even thinking about it, that's who's going to show up in the first ring of your map for each document that you're going to write. And by the way, that's whether or not it happens to be your supervisor, and I just put all these words in here to make you think who might be the real audiences of a given business document. Well, so then you'll quite naturally think of the second most important person. That's who's going to show up in the second ring of your map, and so on and so forth. So when you make a map of multiple audiences like this, you almost effortlessly will organize all these readers from most important close to you in the diagram to least important on the outer edge of the diagram, and that's a good way to begin thinking about all your readers. So I'd like you to do this. I'm going to ask you to just pause the video at this point, and for the assignment that you're working on, create a map of the multiple audiences for the document. And then we'll move on to the second part of getting to know your readers. All right, so you've mapped your audiences. The next thing you want to do is categorize them. For every business document that you will ever write, there is a person or a group of people who happen to be in the power position. And by definition, that means they get to make decisions based upon whatever you have written to them. And we call them your primary audiences, and you certainly want to identify among all the people who are going to ever read your document who are the primary audiences. But they're not everyone who's going to read your document. You'll also find that for virtually all documents, you'll also have secondary audiences. And by definition, they're the people who are not in the power position. They're the ones who have to do or die based on whatever decision the primary audience makes. And so they are the people who are affected by the decisions of the primaries. The third category you may or may not have for any given business document. Intermediary is a fancy word for the pass-through person, and this is something that we know happens all the time in business, that you may send a document to someone, but he or she just passes it on immediately to somebody else. And that might be an administrative assistant who passes your document on to the boss, or it might go the opposite direction. You might in fact address the document to the boss, and then you may know that the boss is going to assign the response of that document to somebody else in the organization. So you certainly want to know if there are intermediary audiences on your map of audiences, and if there are, well, you can disregard them, because if that's all they're doing is passing it on, they don't really interact with your document in any real way, fine. It's complicated enough to write to both primaries and secondaries all at the same time. The fourth category, gatekeeper, is similar to intermediary. It's somebody who passes your document on, but it's importantly different from the intermediary in that the gatekeeper has the power to decide not to pass your document on. And so in other words, you get rejected right away at the early level, and you're not in the running to be selected for your proposal or your report or whatever the document happens to be. So what you want to do is identify for all the people on your map of audiences, whether they are primary, secondary, intermediary, or gatekeeper. In reality, it's possible for someone to be in more than one of these categories. For example, you could be writing to someone who is a primary audience, who makes a decision based on your document, but also that person then is affected by whatever decision he or she has made, so that makes them both primary and secondary. So, I want you to do this. I want you to categorize your audiences. The way to do it quickly is mark up your map. For each ring of your map, mark that person or group of people, P if they're primary, S if they're secondary, I if they're intermediary, G if they're a gatekeeper, and if they happen to fall into more than one category, maybe they're a P plus S or a I plus P or whatever they happen to be. So do that, and then we'll talk about analyzing your audience.